All right, good morning, my friends. It's what day is it? Tuesday, and that's the first day of August. Life's going by pretty fast. We each have 4,000 weeks average that we get to walk this planet. 70 something years. Some of us are going to live longer than others. Some won't. So uh, we should make every one of these weeks count, really, right? And so it's important that we do that, that we consider that, and that we live our life that way. And so, man, hope you had a great night last night. I worked a little later and had to exchange some stuff at a store, and then came home and kind of journaled about some projects that we're working on. And Tam and I just kind of sat in the same room, didn't talk to each other a lot. That was probably my fault, but just trying to get some stuff down. And so it was good. It was a rich day. Looking forward to this one as well. Let's jump into some truth today. We're in Luke chapter 4. And, man, for those who have been journeying with us, it's taken a minute to get here because Luke is determined that you and me would understand before we even hear a word from Jesus that he is the Messiah. He is the promised one. He is the hope of glory. He is all and everything that we need. And that because of the devastation that happened in the fall, and even when God brought out a select group of people through Abraham and gave them the standard of holiness and told them that he would bless them if they did, and he would bring curses if they didn't, that they couldn't sustain that. They find themselves really in a ritualistic deal, religion, but no life. And so they're all crying out for the Messiah. They know partially that they're in great need of him, but they think they're in need of him for him to rescue them from the burden and bondage of Rome and the burden and bondage of life and all of that. And he has come not for that purpose. He has come to remove the bondage of sin, to release the captives, to give them sight that they can see who they are. And this is what he's come to do. And so he chooses Isaiah 61 to be the first message that we get to hear from Jesus. And so that's where we are, just to kind of bring you up to speed. He's been baptized, and he is now saturated with the Spirit of God. The Spirit descended on him like a dove at that baptism. John saw it. I'm assuming the rest of the people saw it. The voice in heaven, "This is my beloved Son in whom I'm well pleased." And Jesus walks up out of those waters, fully human, encased in this flesh that was inserted into Mary's womb before he was yet even breathing life. And so he matured in the womb. He came out like a baby. He grew in wisdom and stature and favor with men. He grew. And so he's encased in this flesh. He does not have a sin nature because the blood of Joseph isn't flowing through him. It is the blood of Christ, God himself. And so he is fully man, and he has laid aside his deity, so to speak. And so the Spirit coming on him is what will happen to you and to me when we come to Christ. Not in total like it is to him, because we do have that sin nature, but he doesn't. So everything he does, he will do in the power of the Spirit of God who has saturated him. That's why when we get to this, so after the baptism, went to the wilderness. After the wilderness, he was still in Judea, walks into one of the regions where John the Baptist is. He's got his disciples there, and he goes, "Behold, the Lamb of God who takes away the sin of the world." That's when Andrew runs off after him. And so you get Andrew and Peter, and you get Philip and Nathaniel, and then the other disciples. So by the time he turned over the money tables there in that same area after his baptism, after the wilderness wandering. Then he made his way through Samaria on his way to Galilee, and there he met a woman at the well. He told her who she was, and then she ran and told the city she has found the Messiah, and so now they've headed. Jesus is headed on to Galilee. He's in that region. There's a couple of hundred towns in that area, and it is his custom to speak in these synagogues, just like it was Paul. Synagogues are not temples. They are gathering places. They are places where believers would gather. You can see it back in Ezekiel day when they had no temple and they were scattered. Ezekiel, you would find him sitting and people around and him teaching. Go read that and from the prophet and see it in that perspective. And you'll see that it didn't matter whether it was a building or not. They were outside gatherings, synagogue. They then begin to build these little outposts. So by the time Jesus comes, Jewish believers are gathering, and there's a trumpet blast to let them know that, hey, we're gathering this Sabbath day. And then there would be the great Shema stated, "Hear, O Israel, the Lord thy God is one, and you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength, and you will love your neighbor as yourself." And you should speak to these things, they would remind themselves, as they get up and as they go and as they lay down, and all of those things that teach them to their children. This was a crucial piece. They would pray, and those prayers would be in some sense responsive. So the one in charge would pray, and the others would say amen at certain points, and there would be some singing that would be taking place. There would be a reading of the Torah, the law, and then there would be a reading from the prophets or one of the other writings that could be the poets. And then someone would stand to read it, and then the teacher would sit, and they would hear truth. This is what Jesus walked into. And in some sense, the custom has been that if a new rabbi came in, he was free to speak. You were given that privilege. And so everywhere Jesus went, he was given permission to speak because he was a floating itinerant rabbi, so to speak. So here's where we find ourselves. This is what all of this says, and we're just going to have time really I think, to look at two of them, that his sayings that he had. He has four, and we're going to see those. Let's start in verse 14 so we can kind of get the context of chapter 4. And Jesus returned to Galilee in the power of the Spirit, right? So that's what he's done. I just gave you the journey through Samaria, all of that. He's now up in Galilee. That's where he's from, Nazareth. He's now walking into that city, going into that synagogue. All of those people know him. They watched him grow up. They knew he was Joseph's son, that he was a carpenter. They knew all of those things. No doubt, many of them had heard the stories, whether they believed them or not, that he was a special child. That and Mary, was had a visitation from the angels or from the angel, and so they may have known those things. But what they did know as well was that news about him spread throughout all the surrounding regions because of his time down in Judea. After his baptism, he did the first miracle there in Cana. So there were miracles that were taking place. He was doing some teaching in that area, in Judea. And so all of that news, as people would travel back and forth, they were bringing news up there. Man, there's this new guy in town back here, and here's what's going on, right? And so this is what's happening. And he began teaching in the synagogues, and he was praised by all. There was great work going on in Galilee. It really wasn't until he hit Judea, where the temple was and where all the Pharisees in that sense were, not that they weren't everywhere, but in there. And that's when really the persecution began. But up until that, right now he's in this praiseworthy section. Now it will come, he will preach in Nazareth once again, and they will try to stone him. And so, but that's a different deal. It's his first one here. And so he came to Nazareth, where he had been brought up, verse 19. And as was his custom, he entered the synagogue on the Sabbath. Jesus always was going to the Sabbath. On the Sabbath, he was going to do exactly what the law required. He was going to rest. He was going to worship. And so that's what he was doing. That's where you find him there. And he stood up to read. So because he's the traveling rabbi, they give him the privilege. Then he stands up and reads. And the scroll of Isaiah, the prophet, was handed to him. So he's going to be the reader today. He's going to be the one who will read it, and then he will teach it. And so they hand him the scroll of Isaiah. Now, whether or not he asked for that or they handed it to him, it is a sovereign act of God that scroll would be given that day. It could have been that they had readings that they were doing regularly, and this was in that agenda. If it was, then no doubt a sovereign God had orchestrated all of that so that the scroll of Isaiah, that's the important thing, don't remember, was handed to him. Because Isaiah spoke prolifically about the Messiah and his coming and all of those things. And so this is the perfect scroll. And the text, they didn't have them in chapters, verses, but he knew where to find what he wanted to find, because it is the announcement of Messiah. And this is exactly what he's coming to do, to announce that he is Messiah, right? That is, that he is God. He is the King of kings. He is the one who will sit upon the throne of David that God established, not David. And he will rule from that throne forever and ever. And so this is what they are first now beginning to hear, and we get to listen in. And so this is what it says. And the scroll of Isaiah, the prophet, was handed to him. And he unrolled the scroll and found the place where it was written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me." Now, that's a term in Isaiah to refer to the Messiah, that he would come and the Spirit of God would be on him, right? And so when he reads this, everyone knows this is a messianic statement. Now, maybe they're assuming that he's going to preach about the Messiah, right? Because there were lots of that going on. Hey, listen, the Messiah is coming, right? Let's get ready. That they knew that John was saying, hey, he's coming. Let's prepare the way. So those who had heard of John the Baptist and all of that, they would go, man, John, this prophet out there, in the wilderness and baptizing in the Jordan, this guy says it's soon. So maybe that's been the mantra that they're now hearing. Everybody's beginning to have a buzz about the Messiah. And so when Jesus stands to read this and then sits, this is what he read. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the favorable year of the Lord. He says, listen, I have come in the filled and saturated with the Spirit, and he's on me. And I've been anointed. That is, I have been saturated with the Spirit for a purpose. And the purpose is to bring good news to the poor, release to the captives, sight to the blind, and freedom to the oppressed. Because it is the year of Jubilee. It is the year where everything goes back as it was. You lived for 50 years and you had bought some land or borrowed some land or whatever. At the end of that 50, or you were indebted to somebody. At the end of that 50 years, it all went back like it was. The puzzle was all put back in the box, and then it was reassembled. And so you would if you were in need of forgiveness, it was given to you. Whatever debt you held, it was wiped from the books. If you had lost your possessions in some sense, you were gaining it back. And so this is exactly what Jesus is going to do. He is going to forgive us and restore us to what we had in the garden. This is exactly what the gospel is doing. It's important that we know it and we see it that way. So let's start and break this thing down. That's the whole skinny on it. Now, let's look at these line by line. We'll look at 2 today and we'll look at 2 tomorrow. And then Thursday we'll look at kind of a message that he began to speak after that. But the first thing he says is that he has anointed me. That is, the Spirit's on me for a purpose. That's what it means, because he has anointed me. Like, that's the purpose. Why was he filled with the Spirit? Because he had this message, the message of Messiah, the messianic message that he is offering to all who have abandoned the kingdom, who have walked in darkness, who have lost the light of who they are, who have lost the abundant life that God offers, and that find themselves really self-absorbed. He says, I have come to bring good news to the poor. Now, it's interesting when we start looking at this. There's several words for poor and poverty in the scriptures. Jesus chose the one here, tokos, right? It's actually, there's a PT, tokos, right? It's one who crouches and covers. It's a beggar. That's the word that he's using here. It is the lowest form of poor that there is. There's another word, pentekios, which means you have very little, right? And so you look at the widow woman who put she just had, a really small aspect to give. That would be that. You look at the widow who, when Elijah the prophet came, she was just going to eat the last bit of what they had. And then her and her son were going to perish. And so that's poor. That's like you have little. This is you have nothing. So when he says poor, The flavor of that word is to crouch and to cover. It is shame based. It is the reality that I'm not even I don't even know how to earn anything. I have nothing to bring. I have nothing to offer. I'm sitting over here against the curb, and I've kind of got my hand over my face, and I've got my hand out, just hoping somebody will come by and put something in it so that I can live. This is what he's saying. So let's don't misunderstand what's going on here. Now, is he talking about the physical poor? I mean, that's what a lot of people say, and you quote, one of the stories of the Beatitudes, "Blessed are the poor." I'm grateful that one of the gospel writers gave it the perspective that was true. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Jesus is always talking about now. It is true that he did call that many of us are poor, right? There's something about that I think it's when we're impoverished, when we don't have a lot, we begin to analyze what's going on, and we take stock of what's happening. How many rags to riches stories have you heard where it was a single mom and she had nothing? I think J.K. Rowling was kind of like that. There were several who found themselves like that. How many people found themselves at the end? They had given up and there was no hope, and then they came out of that poverty. Why is that? Because there's a drive that begins to kick in at some point, a hunger, if you will, to get out of this station that you find yourself in life. And this is the gospel. There has to come a place in the mind of an unbeliever where they see themselves as this wretchedness, right? And they have to go, man, I have nothing. Everything I offer is just a dirty rag. Remember how that's spoken of? Your righteousness is this filthy rag. I got nothing to bring. I'm just impoverished. The good news is that God is deeply in love with the spiritual beggars. They have nothing to offer, and they are in need of everything. The gospel isn't really understood until you see yourself in that place. I have nothing to offer. This is my posture. I am so ashamed of my life, and I just need God to put something in my hand to give me sustenance, right? That's what he's saying. So it's not a matter of saying, sure, I'll join your church, right? Sure, I'll fill out the Connect card. Sure, I'll ask Jesus to come into my heart, right? Hey, you know what? I can go to India and preach that all day long, and they'll go, sure, I'll add your God to mine. But when you say that he is the way, the truth, and the life, no man comes. Did I preach that there? That's when the rumblings start. That's when they get upset, because you have declared that every other thing they thought was of value isn't, and everything has to be thrown away in place of the one God, the one true God, the Messiah, right? And so we get to Psalm 107, and hear how it's worded here. This is how the psalmist describes this poverty. They wandered in the wilderness in a desert region. They did not find a way to an inhabited city. They were hungry and thirsty. Their souls felt weak within them. They cried out to the Lord in their trouble, and he saved them from their distress. He also had them walk on a straight way to go to an inhabited city. They shall give thanks to the Lord for his mercy and his wonders, the Son of mankind. For he satisfies the thirsty soul, and he has filled the hungry soul with good. The only way they got that satisfaction was because they were in this state of beggarliness, right? That's who they were. That's all they could do. Listen to some of the other scriptures that I read to you say these things. Listen to what Psalm 34 says. The Lord is near to who? The brokenhearted, right? What does that mean? Those who you're crushed. You've got nothing and you know it, and you're just broken. And he saves those who are crushed in spirit. Luke 18, remember how the beggar began to pray? Now he was telling a story. It says in Luke, two men went up to pray, one Pharisee and the other tax collector. The Pharisee stood and began to pray in regard to himself. God, I thank thee that I'm not. That man doesn't know his poverty, right? But then the other one says, he's beating his chest, unwilling even to raise his eyes to heaven. Why? He's ashamed. He's afraid to even look to the heavens, look toward God. And he's saying, have mercy on me, right? This is the whole gospel right here. You get to Revelation chapter 3. Listen to what he says to one of the churches there. Because you say, I am rich and have become wealthy and have no need of anything, You think that's where you are, and you don't know that you are wretched, miserable, poor, blind, and naked. God is offering to the poor jubilee. I'm going to grant you forgiveness, and I'm going to give you spiritual possessions. That's the whole point. We didn't even get to 2, but man, what a great journey. Well, bless you guys. Can't wait to share more of this with you in the morning.